So, Jennifer, thank you so much for being on What's News, Neighbor.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
This is Jennifer Wohlenhaus Bloomberg, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yay, I got it right. And we're talking to you today because you're a neighbor, you're at Waveland Park, and also because you have some interesting things to tell us about what you do. So maybe if you could start by explaining what you do and how that goes for you.
Well, I do many things. I consider myself to be a musician, first of all, but as part of that, I teach at Drake University and also at Grinnell College, and then I am the principal oboist of the Des Moines Symphony. So those are my sort of three biggies that I do. At Drake, I teach all the oboists and bassoonists. I teach music theory and aural skills, which is ear training. At Grinnell, I teach oboe and bassoon, and then also this fall term, fall two as they're calling it, I'm going to be teaching aural skills there as well. And then in the symphony, being the principal oboist means that I am the first chair oboe. So I give the A when the orchestra tunes, when Jonathan Sturm, our concertmaster, turns around and nods to me, then I play an A and the orchestra tunes, and I play whatever parts I'm supposed to play.
So okay, well that took care of that question. I was going to say, well, what chair? How many oboists are there traditionally in a symphony?
In a symphony, there are two oboes and an English horn, which is a sort of larger version of an oboe.
Okay, all right. Well, so an oboe is a kind of maybe just most people probably know what an oboe is, but kind of explain it just a little bit.
Well, I have it right here.
Oh, how wonderful. How handy.
It's kind of hard to show completely on the screen, but it is a small woodwind instrument. And then in order to play it, you have to have a reed. And the reed is a double reed, meaning it has two blades. So it's kind of hard to see. I don't know if I can do this in the camera,
Yep.
but you
Oh
can
yeah,
see
there you
that's
go. I
open.
see it.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
I blow through that to be able to make the sound. So it's sort of unique. I spend a lot of time making those reeds. That's part of being an oboist too. You
Oh
sit and
really?
make reeds. Yes.
Oh,
In
I
fact,
just assumed that you bought them from someplace, but you have
well,
to make them.
you buy the cane, and then the cane originally looks, when it's been partially processed, looks like this. And then eventually it turns into this when I tie it with thread, but this is still shiny. It's like bark on here. And then I scrape it, and then it turns into the reed that I showed you.
And, and the one thing I always remember about oboists is, and maybe this goes for all reed instruments, right? Is that you have to keep them moist, correct?
Correct. They have to be soaked in water before you can really play on them. Makes them a little bit more pliable.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, how long have you been a teacher, Jennifer?
Well, I have taught at Drake since 2002 and Grinnell since 2003. And I've always had, private students along the way too. I also have some, high school students and younger that start out on the oboe or the bassoon.
Mm-hmm. And how many and how are you doing that right now? I mean, we've talked about this a little bit. COVID. So how's that going?
It's all on Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or whatever the student can do. At Drake, we use Zoom. Grinnell, we've been using WebEx. And then for my private students, quite honestly, it's just whatever they're comfortable with or have access to technologically.
Right, because you can't have a mask on and play an oboe.
Not very easily. Now, I have a story sort of to tell. Monday, one of my students at Drake, they have a strict protocol. If someone's been exposed to COVID, they have to quarantine. Monday was a live stream concert for the Drake Wind Symphony. And so my principal oboist in that ensemble, one of my students, had to be quarantined and I had to go in and play the concert. Now, we still wear masks, but we have to cut a slit or a hole to be able to put the reed in. And then also oboes, unfortunately, emit a lot of aerosol particles. They've been doing many studies about that. So what I have to do is I have a little bell cover that I have to put on the oboe bell right now so that I don't spread my aerosols to everyone. So that's what we've been doing to mitigate that, because then that makes it safe, and we're distanced out when we play, just to make sure that we aren't infecting anyone, accidentally.
Wow. Wow. Well, so what's your background? Where did you study?
Well, actually, I am a Drake grad. My undergrad was at Drake. And then I went to the San Francisco Conservatory of Music for my master's. And then I came back, and about the same time that I came back to Iowa, the English hornist retired from the Des Moines Symphony. And so I spent 3 years as the English hornist in the symphony before assuming the principal oboe job when I won that audition. So
Oh, wow.
then at some point, I can't remember exactly, was it 2008, I believe, I went back and started working on my doctorate at University of Iowa. Of course, at this time, I'm already teaching at Drake, so I had to do it kind of a bit at a time, and I would drive back and forth from Des Moines to Iowa City. But I finished that in 2015, so yay.
Long road. So, I'll have to look up. So I'm familiar with the oboe, but with the English, is that what you call it? The English horn?
The English horn, yes.
I'm not familiar
Um,
with that.
it's a little bit taller than the oboe, and it has a kind of a rounded bulb-shaped bell on the bottom.
Hmm. Okay. And
The
then the bassoon is very long, correct? The
bassoon is
bassoon is
very
long and
long.
has a
It has
curved aperture.
a bocal. It has a bocal on the end of it. I don't have the bassoon out right now, but I have the bocal close at hand. So yes.
Okay.
And it's
Well,
not
I like
it's not the norm that people play both of these. It just so happens that I ended up learning how to play both of those.
and no offense, but you must have very good lungs, right? Because it requires a great deal of air to play those kinds of instruments, correct?
You have to have a lot of control, and you have to be not afraid when all the air goes bad, because you have to look for places actually to breathe out many times to get rid of some air, and then you can keep playing until the next place in the music where you can take some air in that's good
Wow.
air.
Wow. Wow. Well, maybe in this post, when I put this up to share it, I'll find pictures of the different instruments too, so I can put those up as well, so people can see those. Because I think it's, I remember learning as a kid, learning all the instruments of a symphony, and that was they're
Mhm.
different, and they're not in a band. There's some very different instruments. Obviously, the
There are
strings are
some,
different.
yes. Yeah, strings are not in bands, but all the wind instruments that are in the orchestra are in bands too. But there are some that are specifically in band and not in orchestra.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Well, so you're in the symphony. What's going on with the Des Moines Symphony these days?
Right now, we are doing live streamed concerts. It's called Live from the Temple. And the first one happened in early October. And it's a small ensemble, more of a chamber ensemble made up of orchestra members. And then we've been able to play some of that literature, which our audience doesn't usually get to hear. The next one is in November, and I actually didn't play on the first one. I wasn't programmed to play any of the literature that was on that one. I play on the next one, and then the one that's in December as well. And the symphony's website is a great resource for that. It's dmsymphony.org if you want to find out more information about that.
And I'll include that link in in a post too, so people can find it. Because I mean, like all the arts right now, we need to support these arts if we want them to remain,
Remain.
right? Because this COVID is obviously it's hurting everybody. So certainly the arts where people can't get together. So how many? I'm sorry, how many programs are you on the calendar for the rest of this year?
For
Or
the rest of this year, there are 2 more.
okay,
And then
okay.
going forth, we'll have to let you know about January through, well, our season usually ends in May. So we'll have to let you know how that proceeds in the spring.
Right, right.
We
We're
don't
all
know
kind of
yet.
figuring it out.
Yeah, we have to
So
kind of go as we can.
yeah, right, right. So how long has the symphony been around for Des Moines? That's kind of an interesting history. Do you know much about it?
I believe it has been around about 80 years, 85
Wow,
years. Yeah.
wow. That's a long one. It's kind of, and we're really fortunate to have a symphony, right? I mean, I guess we're the
Correct.
biggest city in
Yes.
Iowa, but to be able to support a symphony, that's a big deal.
Yes, yes, it's very important. But I feel like Des Moines really cares about the arts. In some of the other places that I've lived, of course, San Francisco, they care about the arts a great deal too. But other places that I've been around and growing up, I do feel that Des Moines has a good background. People really care, they want to keep that
Mhm.
here. It's sort of a sense of pride to say, hey, we have a symphony, we have an art center that's great, we have the Des Moines Playhouse and all the other theater groups downtown, Des Moines Performing Arts. We have lots of things for residents of Des Moines to go do when we can, when it's not COVID.
Right, right, right. So how long have you been a resident of Waveland Park, Jennifer? We'll finish up with that.
Well, actually, we just have been here 3 years now. Before then, we were in Beaverdale, okay? But 3 years ago, we bought our house here.
Oh, wow, wow. And an oboe isn't an intrusive instrument. You probably aren't making too much noise for your neighbors.
No, no. When we're outside, like if I'm practicing or somebody's practicing in the room in which I practice, if you're just next door out or outside, you can probably hear just a little bit faintly, but it's not loud.
Right,
Not the
with a
same way
pleasant
a
thing.
guitar and an amp would be.
Right, right. And I'm sorry, did you say, are you teaching so you are teaching some additional students besides at Drake and Grinnell, right? You've got some private
Some
students that are
younger
taking
students,
you.
yeah, high school on down. I think the youngest one I have right now is a sixth grader. Yeah. So, I have to get them started or this won't continue. This is important. And I look back and my predecessor in the symphony and my predecessor at Drake, same person, they were so crucial in me being here today. If my grandmother had not gotten me some lessons with him, I'm not sure that I would be doing this today because I was from a small town in southwest Iowa, and my mother was a musician, but she didn't play the oboe. She could help me musically, but she couldn't help with the technical side of the oboe. But when we would come visit grandma and grandpa who lived here in Des Moines, I would have a lesson with Jay Light, who was my predecessor there, and I credit him with making sure I was on the right track. So I'm trying to, as a private teacher, make sure that I can help those who want to be going down this path, help them out too.
Right, because it's probably not, I mean, what's the, people probably, I'm just going to guess, they gravitate to the strings and it's probably oboes not as
Well,
popular,
yeah,
right?
other strings and other band instruments, just simply because it's a little tricky. It's maybe not the easiest thing to do, and some students can be very easily frustrated with that. So it takes a special student who can, really persevere and stick with it to do both of the double reeds and also some of the other instruments like French horn. That's another one that's very difficult as well.
Mm. Well, thank you for taking time to explain what you do and about these instruments. I'll be sure to include the links for the symphony and some pictures, additional pictures, so people can see the different instruments. And I'm gonna guess, I mean, maybe one of your students lives in our neighborhood, but you probably are only oboist in the neighborhood, or at least a
Well,
professional one.
actually, my second oboe colleague lives over on 46th or 7th. I can't remember. I know where her house is. I don't pay attention to the street sign,
Yeah.
but she does
Wow.
live there.
We might be oboe rich then in
Yeah.
Waveland. Awesome. Well, anyway, well, Jennifer, thank you so much for being on What's News, Neighbor. And
Sure.
just as
Thanks
a
for having me.
caveat, yeah, we'll see each other maybe next year when I walk my granddaughter, who's loves your daughter, and they're
Yes.
best of friends. So we'll see. But
Yeah,
anyway, but thank you, Jennifer, for being on today.
sure. Thanks a lot. Mhm.